Hi, this is Amy from Pastor's Wallet, where we equip pastors like you to master your personal finances and practice wise biblical stewardship. I'm here to answer a question for you, and today's question is about the housing allowance. Today's question is actually one that someone typed into a search engine, which then led them to the pastorswallet.com blog. This is what it says. How do you get the housing allowance for a pastor? Basically, the church just says this much of the salary is a housing allowance. It's that simple, but I'll explain it, don't worry. The nice thing is the church doesn't have to go through the IRS or report anything to the IRS at all. This is how it works. The pastor, you should estimate what your expenses are and then request a housing allowance from your church. Different churches do it different ways, so I know some churches say this is your housing allowance, but the most effective way is if the pastor actually estimates the housing allowance. So the pastor estimates their housing expenses and tells the church. Then the church has to officially designate the housing allowance. This can be done in an official letter, in an employment agreement, it can be done in meeting minutes, or just a line item on the budget, but it has to be in writing. That's the most important part. Then the church tells the pastor, okay, you have your housing allowance, and you start paying it. Usually it's with your normal paycheck. Part of your paycheck is housing allowance, part is taxable salary. Then throughout the year, the pastor needs to track their housing expenses. This is really important because you need to make sure they line up with what you actually got as a housing allowance. At the end of the year, add it all up, and if you actually collected more in housing allowance than your actual expenses, you have to add that back in to your taxable income. That sounds scary, but it's actually really, really easy. On Form 1040, where you file your taxes, on the income line, you just add it and write in excess housing allowance. It's that simple. So the pastor reports the housing allowance to the IRS that way. Well, the extra housing allowance. If you opted out of Social Security, you actually don't report your housing allowance to the IRS at all. If you haven't opted out of Social Security, you have to pay Social Security taxes on that housing allowance. So you'll add that back into your salary when you fill out Schedule SE. Now, the church's only responsibility is letting the pastor know how much they actually paid out in housing allowance at the end of the year, but the rest is on the pastor. It's important to remember, pastors, this is a benefit that your church is giving you, but according to the IRS, it's all on you. You are the one responsible for it. So if you don't do a good job or you don't report the numbers right, they're not going after your church, they're going after you. So it's really important to do this correctly. If you have other questions, go ahead and email me at amy@pastorswallet.com or look through my other videos to see if I've already answered your question. And don't forget to subscribe.